Please don't leave me! Leave her! The fire will finish it!
Your husband lied about everything. I buried Vanessa myself. You're not getting a dime.
Cold rain whipped across my face as jagged metal crumpled around my shattered legs. Through the toxic smoke, a silhouette moved, not toward me, but toward the back seat. He pulled her free. As darkness finally took me, his voice echoed, not screaming my name, but hers. He left me to burn. Nothing prepares you for the sound of tearing steel. It is not like the movies, where everything happens in a chaotic, fiery blur. In reality, a car crash is a deeply intimate, terrifyingly slow symphony of destruction. You hear the initial thud, the terrifying screech of tires losing their desperate grip on wet asphalt, and then the agonizing groan of the chassis twisting in ways metal was never meant to twist. It was a Tuesday night, the kind of mundane, unremarkable Tuesday that lulls you into a false sense of security. Oliver Ortiz and I had been married for 7 years. 7 years of shared mortgages, joint bank accounts, and whispered promises in the dark. He was a senior partner at a prestigious architectural firm in downtown Seattle, a man whose tailored suits and charismatic smile hid the rot I would only later discover. In the back seat sat Vanessa Higgins. Vanessa was a junior associate at his firm, a woman in her late 20s with a penchant for expensive perfume and a laugh that always felt a fraction too loud. We had just left a tedious corporate dinner, and Oliver, playing the role of the benevolent boss, had insisted we drive her back to her apartment in Bellevue because of the sudden torrential downpour. I was in the passenger seat, my head leaning against the cool glass of the window, watching the streetlights bleed into long neon streaks across the rain-slicked highway. The tension in the car was thick, a suffocating blanket woven from months of unspoken suspicions. I had noticed the lingering glances, the hushed phone calls Oliver took in the garage, the sudden, unexplained late nights at the office. But every time I brought it up, I was met with his textbook gaslighting. "You're being paranoid, Samantha. She's just a kid trying to learn the ropes." The tires hydroplaned. I remember Oliver cursing, a sharp, guttural sound. His hands jerked the steering wheel of the heavy SUV. The vehicle fishtailed violently. My heart slammed against my ribs as the world outside the windshield spun into a dizzying vortex of dark trees and blinding headlights from oncoming traffic. We hit the concrete median at 70 miles an hour. The impact was catastrophic. The airbags deployed with the force of a bomb, punching the air from my lungs and snapping my head back against the headrest. The SUV flipped, launching us into a terrifying airborne roll. Gravity ceased to exist. I was caught in a horrifying centrifuge of shattered glass, deployed nylon, and flying debris. When the vehicle finally slammed back down into the muddy embankment, it landed on its side my side. Silence followed. Not a peaceful silence, but the heavy, ringing void that comes after deafening trauma. I was pinned. The dashboard had buckled inward, trapping my legs in a vise of crushed plastic and steel. My right arm hung at an unnatural angle, the bone fractured. Warm, sticky fluid, I didn't know if it was oil, antifreeze, or my own blood dripped steadily onto my cheek. Every breath was a jagged knife tearing through my ribs. "Oliver?" I croaked, my voice barely a raspy whisper. Through the spiderweb fractures of the windshield, the pale moonlight filtered in. I forced my heavy eyelids open. Oliver was moving. He had managed to unbuckle himself from the driver's seat above me. He was bruised, a cut bleeding freely down his forehead, but he was alive. He was mobile. Relief, pure and naive, washed over me. "He's going to help me." "Oliver," I said again, louder this time, fighting the suffocating fog of pain. "I'm trapped. My legs. I can't feel my legs." He looked down at me. For a fraction of a second, our eyes met in the dim, chaotic light. What I saw in his gaze in that exact moment will haunt me until the day I die. There was no panic. There was no desperate, frantic love of a husband trying to save his wife. There was only a cold, calculating hesitation. Then, he looked away. He climbed over the center console, his heavy boots pressing down on the shattered remnants of the dashboard, inches from my trapped hands. He wasn't reaching for me. He was reaching into the back seat. "Vanessa," Oliver hissed, his voice tight with an emotion I had never heard him direct toward me. "Vanessa, baby, are you okay? Wake up, baby." The word dropped into the wreckage like a lit match. The physical agony of my crushed body was suddenly eclipsed by a profound, soul-shredding horror. He was kicking out the rear window. The sound of glass shattering outward filled the cabin. "Oliver!" I screamed, the sound tearing my throat. Smoke was beginning to billow from the crumpled hood. The acrid stench of burning electrical wires and leaking gasoline flooded the small space. "Oliver, please! The car is smoking! Help me!" He didn't even look back. He hauled Vanessa's limp body through the broken window, wrapping his arms around her waist. She groaned, draped over his shoulder. He kicked the door wide open, stepping out into the freezing mud and relentless rain. Through the mangled window frame, I watched my husband of 7 years carry his mistress up the embankment. He stumbled, caught his balance, and kept going. He didn't turn around. He didn't call 911. He didn't look back to see if the woman he had sworn to love and protect was burning alive. The smoke grew thicker, choking the oxygen from my lungs. The orange glow of flames began to lick at the edges of the engine block. I reached out with my one good arm, my bloody fingers clawing uselessly at the crushed door handle. "Don't leave me," I sobbed, the sound muffled by the roaring in my ears. But he was gone, swallowed by the dark and the rain. The fire crept closer, heating the metal around me. I closed my eyes, the bitter taste of betrayal mingling with the ash on my tongue, and surrendered to the encroaching dark. Pain is a demanding master. It wakes you before your mind is ready to be awake, dragging you up through layers of heavy sedation into a reality that feels entirely hostile. I woke to the rhythmic, synthetic beep of a heart monitor and the sterile, chemical smell of a trauma ICU. I tried to move, but my body felt like it was encased in concrete. My right arm was heavily casted, my left leg elevated and pinned with intimidating metal rods. Bandages wrapped tightly around my ribs, making every inhalation a calculated risk. "Take it easy, Mrs. Ortiz," a soft voice murmured. A nurse, her name tag read. Abigail Jenkins stepped into my limited field of vision. She adjusted a clear tube snaking into my wrist. "You're at Seattle General. You've been out for 4 days." 4 days. The memories rushed back like a tidal wave of broken glass. The crash, the rain, the smell of gasoline, and Oliver carrying Vanessa up the hill, Oliver leaving me to die. A ragged sob tore from my throat, immediately triggering a spasm of agonizing pain in my broken ribs. Nurse Jenkins placed a warm, steadying hand on my shoulder. "Breathe, Samantha. Just breathe. You're safe now." A passing truck driver saw the flames and pulled you out right before the engine caught completely. "You are very, very lucky." Lucky. The word tasted like ash. Before I could ask about Oliver, before I could demand to know where my traitorous husband was, the heavy wooden door of the ICU room pushed open. A man walked in. He wasn't wearing a white coat. He wore a rumpled gray suit that looked like it had been slept in, and a tired expression that suggested he had seen far too much of the worst parts of humanity. "Mrs. Ortiz," he said, his voice a low, gravelly baritone. He pulled a small notebook from his breast pocket. "I'm Detective Bennett Reed, Seattle PD. I know you're in a lot of pain, and I apologize for the intrusion, but I need to ask you a few questions about the events of Tuesday night." I swallowed the dryness in my throat. Nurse Jenkins offered me a small cup of water with a straw. I took a sip, my eyes never leaving the detective. "Where is he?" I rasped, my voice sounding like sandpaper. "Where is my husband?" Detective Reed paused. He looked down at his notebook, then back up at me, his brow furrowing in a way that set off alarm bells in my sluggish, medicated brain. "Mr. Ortiz is currently at home, recovering from minor lacerations and a concussion," Reed said slowly. "He was discharged yesterday. Which brings me to why I'm here, Mrs. Ortiz." He stepped closer to the foot of my bed. The air in the room seemed to chill. "Your husband gave us a very thorough, very emotional statement regarding the crash," Detective Reed continued, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made me shrink back into the pillows. "He stated that the two of you had been arguing. He claimed that you were driving, that you were highly intoxicated, and that you became hysterical, grabbing the wheel and intentionally steering the vehicle into the median." My heart flatlined. "What?" I whispered. No, that's a lie. He was driving. Oliver was driving. He also stated," Reed pushed on, ignoring my interruption, "that he was thrown from the vehicle upon impact. He said he woke up in the mud, found you trapped, and tried to pull you out, but the flames pushed him back. He said he ran to the highway to flag down help." "He's lying!" I cried out, the monitors beside me spiking rapidly. He didn't try to save me. He saved her. He pulled Vanessa out of the back seat and left me there. Detective Reed didn't flinch. He didn't write anything down. He simply stood there, absorbing my panic. Then, he leaned forward, resting his hands on the metal railing of my bed. "Mrs. Ortiz," Reed said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "This is where I need you to be completely honest with me." "I am." "Then I need you to explain something to me," he said, his eyes narrowing. "If your husband's story is a lie, if he was driving, and if he pulled this Vanessa woman from the back seat." Reed pulled a small, clear evidence bag from his pocket. Inside was a charred piece of black plastic. It looked like the casing of a camera. "Then why?" the detective asked, his tone laced with absolute bewilderment. "Did your husband tell us he was the only other person in the car? Why did he swear to us, on record, that there was no one named Vanessa with you?" The room spun. "What do you mean?" I stammered. "She was there, Vanessa Higgins. She works at his firm." "Mrs. Ortiz," Reed said softly. "We searched the perimeter. We dragged the woods. We checked the hospitals. There was no third passenger found at the scene. And according to Vanessa Higgins' roommate, she hasn't been seen since she left that dinner party with you and your husband 4 days ago." The bottom fell out of my world. "He told you it was just the two of us?" I asked, my mind racing, trying to piece together a puzzle where all the pieces were stained with blood. "He did," Reed confirmed. "But here's the problem. The paramedics who treated your husband at the scene noted defensive scratches on his arms that didn't match the crash debris, and our forensics team pulled the dashcam from your vehicle. The video was corrupted by the fire, but the audio drive survived." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small digital recorder. He pressed play. Static hissed through the speaker, followed by the terrifying, deafening crunch of metal on concrete. Then, heavy breathing, the sound of shattered glass being kicked away. Then, Oliver's voice, clear as day, cutting through the wreckage. "Vanessa, baby, are you okay? Wake up." There was a muffled groan from a woman. Then my own voice, faint and desperate in the background. "Oliver, please. The car is smoking. Help me." Then, the sound that stopped my heart entirely. It was Vanessa's voice, cold, crisp, and terrifyingly calm. "Is she dead?" Vanessa asked. "Not yet," Oliver replied, his voice devoid of any human empathy. "Leave her. The fire will finish it. Let's go." Click. Detective Reed turned off the recorder. The silence that followed was heavier than the wreckage of the SUV. The realization washed over me, cold and absolute. This wasn't just a husband abandoning his wife in a moment of cowardice. This wasn't a tragic accident turned into a panic-driven lie to avoid liability. Oliver hadn't just left me to die. He and Vanessa had planned it. And now, Vanessa was missing. Oliver was playing the grieving survivor, and I was the loose end that refused to burn. To understand betrayal, you have to understand trust. Trust is the foundation of every shared mortgage, every joint tax return, every quiet Tuesday night. When that foundation is detonated, you don't just fall, you shatter into 1,000 different versions of yourself. The woman who woke up in that hospital bed, the woman who listened to her husband coldly condemn her to a fiery death on a digital recorder, was not the woman who had gotten into the passenger seat of that Volvo. Samantha Ortiz died in the mud on Interstate 90. The woman who remained was something entirely different. I looked at Detective Reed. He was watching me closely, waiting for the hysterics, waiting for the breakdown. I refused to give it to him. My tears had dried up the second I heard Vanessa's voice on that tape. "So," I said, my voice shockingly level despite the agony in my chest. "He thinks I'm going to take the fall for the crash, and he thinks nobody knows Vanessa was ever there." Reed nodded slowly. "He's banking on your word against his. He's already lawyered up Mrs. Ortiz, and he's well connected. The narrative he's spinning, the erratic, drunken wife who grabbed the wheel, is already making its way into the police report, thanks to a few friends he has at the precinct. I'm the only one who has heard this audio file. I kept it off the official logs for now." "Why?" I asked, narrowing my eyes at him. "Because," Reed sighed, pulling up a plastic chair and sitting down heavily beside my bed, "if I log it now, his lawyer will suppress it, claim it was tampered with, or worse, they'll realize you're a threat. If Oliver Ortiz intended for you to die in that car, and he finds out you're awake, lucid, and talking to me. He let the sentence hang in the sterile air. He'll finish the job I finished for him. Exactly, Reed said. Right now, he thinks you're still in a medically induced coma. I told his lawyer that your brain swelling is severe, that you might not ever wake up. It buys us time. Time for what, detective? Time to figure out where the hell Vanessa Higgins is, and why your husband is willing to kill you to cover his tracks. Over the next week, the ICU room became my war room. Nurse Jenkins, who had taken a fierce maternal liking to me, became our gatekeeper. She ensured that my chart reflected a comatose state, actively turning away visitors, including the brief, performative appearance Oliver made with a bouquet of wilted lilies for the benefit of the hospital staff. I lay perfectly still, my eyes closed, listening to the hypocritical squeak of his expensive Italian leather shoes approaching my bed. It's a tragedy, really, I heard Oliver tell one of the attending physicians, his voice dripping with faux sorrow. I just hope she isn't in pain. I focused on the steady beep of my heart monitor, forcing my heart rate to remain calm, even as every fiber of my being screamed to reach out, grab him by his tailored lapels, and choke the life out of him. Once he was gone, the real work began. With Detective Reed running interference at the precinct, I needed my own man on the outside. Through a secure burner phone Reed smuggled in, I contacted Richard Conway. Richard was a forensic accountant and a private investigator I had hired 3 years ago when my sister went through a vicious divorce. He was discreet, ruthless, and highly effective. Samantha, Richard's voice crackled through the phone late one Thursday night. I've been digging into Oliver's firm, specifically the accounts he manages with Vanessa Higgins. You need to brace yourself. I survived a burning car, Richard, I whispered, clutching the phone with my one good hand. I can handle whatever you found. Oliver is broke, Sam. Not just broke, he's drowning. For the last 2 years, he's been embezzling funds from the firm's escrow accounts to cover massive gambling debts in Macau. We're talking upward of $4 million. I closed my eyes. The late nights, the sudden mood swings, the secretive phone calls. It hadn't just been an affair, it was a complete financial collapse. And Vanessa? I asked. Vanessa wasn't just his mistress. She was the firm's junior compliance officer. She was the one who found out about the embezzlement 6 months ago. From what I can tell, instead of turning him in, she leveraged it. She became his partner. They've been siphoning money together into an offshore account in the Caymans. If they had the money, why not just run? I asked, the pieces slowly locking into place. Why try to kill me? Because of the life insurance, Richard said, his voice grim. 2 weeks ago, Oliver updated your policy. He forged your signature and increased the payout. If you die in an accidental tragedy, say, a catastrophic car crash, the policy pays out $5 million, tax-free, enough to replace the embezzled funds before the firm's quarterly audit next month, and leave him and Vanessa a very comfortable nest egg. The sheer, sociopathic brilliance of it was terrifying. They had orchestrated the perfect crime. They would kill me in a staged accident, collect the insurance, and cover their stolen tracks. But the plan had a flaw. I hadn't died. Where is Vanessa now, Richard? I asked. That's the strange part, he replied, the clicking of a keyboard echoing in the background. There's no digital footprint for her since the night of the crash. Her credit cards are cold. Her passport hasn't been scanned. It's like she vanished into thin air the moment they walked away from your car. A cold dread began to pool in my stomach. Oliver had told the police he was alone in the car. He had erased Vanessa from the narrative entirely. If Vanessa was supposed to run away with him, why would he hide her existence from the police? Why wouldn't she just claim she was a passenger, play the victim, and back up his story? Unless she couldn't. I remembered the way Vanessa had groaned when Oliver pulled her from the wreckage. She hadn't been walking. He had carried her. She was injured. Richard, I said, my heart hammering against my bruised ribs. Check the Cayman account, the one they set up together. Who is the primary beneficiary? A long pause, more frantic typing. It's a sole proprietorship, Sam, Richard said, his tone shifting. Set up under a shell corporation. The only authorized signatory is Oliver Ortiz. Vanessa isn't on the account at all. My breath hitched. Oliver hadn't just betrayed me, he had betrayed his partner in crime. Vanessa thought they were staging my death to run away together. But Oliver knew the insurance money would only stretch so far. Why split $5 million with a woman who held the keys to his embezzlement secret? He didn't save her to run away with her. I whispered into the phone, the horrifying truth dawning on me. He pulled her out of the car because if she burned with me, the police would find 2 bodies. They would know he lied about being alone. He needed to get her away from the wreckage. To get rid of her himself, Richard finished, the horror evident in his voice. Oliver hadn't carried his mistress away to save her life. He had carried her away to ensure she never spoke again. And I was the only witness left alive. Rain lashed against the hospital window, mirroring the tempest of realization churning within me. If my deductions were correct, my husband was not merely a coward and an embezzler. He was a cold-blooded murderer who had successfully disposed of his accomplice. Detective Reed stared at me, the harsh fluorescent lights of the ICU casting deep shadows over his lined face. The silence in the room stretched, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the rhythmic hum of my oxygen concentrator. "You think he killed her?" Reed stated, not as a question, but as a grim acknowledgement of the terrifying logic I had just presented. "Think about it, detective," I urged, my voice gaining strength from the sheer adrenaline of survival. Vanessa was the only one who could connect him to the missing $4 million. She was the only witness to his intent to leave me to burn. If they ran away together, she would forever hold that leverage over him. Oliver Ortiz doesn't share power, and he certainly doesn't share money. He used the crash as an opportunity to clean the slate entirely. Reed pulled an encrypted smartphone from his coat pocket, his thumbs flying across the screen. "Conway," he muttered, reading a text from my private investigator. "Richard just forwarded the GPS data from your husband's secondary vehicle, the vintage Porsche he kept in the downtown garage. He drove it the morning after the crash, while you were still in surgery. Where did he go?" "A remote, undeveloped plot of land near Snoqualmie Pass," Reed replied, his eyes darkening. "It's a property owned by a subsidiary of his architectural firm, supposedly slated for a luxury retreat, but the project has been stalled in permitting hell for over a year. It's isolated, heavily wooded, and completely empty. A graveyard." The next 48 hours were a masterclass in psychological endurance. While I remained confined to my bed, trapped in a body held together by titanium rods and sheer willpower, a covert operation was unfolding in the dense, rain-soaked forests of the Pacific Northwest. Nurse Abigail Jenkins continued to play her part flawlessly, updating Oliver daily with fabricated reports of my deteriorating neurological state. "He asked about a DNR today," Nurse Jenkins whispered one evening, adjusting my IV drip. Her jaw was set in a tight, angry line. "He wanted to know the hospital's protocol for removing life support from a patient with zero brain activity." The man didn't even shed a fake tear. "Tell him the ethics committee is convening," I instructed, a cold, dark resolve settling over my heart. "Tell him they need him here on Friday to sign the final authorization papers." While Oliver was busy planning my funeral, Detective Reed and a specialized forensics team were tearing apart the Snoqualmie property. It took them 2 days of trudging through thick mud and dense underbrush before the cadaver dogs finally alerted near an abandoned concrete foundation. On Thursday night, Reed walked into my room. He looked older, his shoulders slumped beneath the weight of whatever he had seen. "We found her," he said quietly, pulling up a chair. I closed my eyes, a complex wave of emotion washing over me. Vanessa Higgins had slept with my husband, had plotted to steal my life, and had coldly asked if I was dead while I lay trapped in burning wreckage. Yet, hearing that her life had been snuffed out in the muddy trenches of a construction site brought no satisfaction, only a profound, hollow sadness. "How?" I asked. "Blunt force trauma to the back of the head," Reed explained grimly. "He struck her with something heavy, likely a tire, iron, or a shovel, shortly after pulling her from your vehicle. He wrapped her in a heavy-duty tarp he kept in the trunk, drove her out to the site in the Porsche the next morning, and buried her beneath 3 feet of loose gravel and concrete mix. Did you find anything else?" A small, grim smile touched the corner of the detective's mouth. "That's the thing about amateur killers, Mrs. Ortiz. They always miss something." Vanessa wasn't as trusting as Oliver thought. Tucked inside her waterproof boot, we found a sealed plastic baggie. Inside was a tiny USB flash drive. My breath hitched. "The embezzlement records?" "Every single one," Reed confirmed. "Wire transfers, forged signatures, offshore account routing numbers, and a series of recorded phone calls between the two of them plotting the timeline for the accident. It's a smoking gun, wrapped in a bow, but we can't just arrest him. Not yet. Why not? I demanded, frustration flaring. You have the body, you have the drive, you have the dashcam audio. Because if we arrest him now, his high-priced defense attorneys will claim Vanessa orchestrated the embezzlement, tried to kill you, and that he killed her in self-defense during a struggle, Reed explained, leaning forward. They will spin a narrative that casts him as a tragic victim of a manipulative mistress. We need him to confess to his intent toward you. We need him to drop the grieving husband act and show his true face. Friday, I said softly, the plan forming crystal clear in my mind. When he comes to pull the plug, Friday morning arrived with a suffocating tension. The ICU room had been transformed into a stage, and I was the lead actress in a play with deadly stakes. Detective Reed had coordinated with the hospital administration. Hidden cameras, disguised as standard medical sensors, were positioned around the room. Audio feeds were routed directly to a command center in the adjacent empty suite, where Reed and two uniformed officers waited. Nurse Jenkins applied a pale, sickly foundation to my face, accentuating the dark circles under my eyes. She turned off the monitors that would display my steady, strong heartbeat, routing the actual data to Reed's room while leaving blank, ominous screens facing the visitor's chair. You ready for this, sweetheart? Nurse Jenkins asked, her hand resting gently on my good shoulder. I've been ready since the moment he walked away from that burning car, I replied. At precisely 10 a.m., the heavy wooden door clicked open. I kept my eyes shut, my breathing shallow and erratic, exactly as a dying woman's should be. The scent of expensive cedarwood cologne and peppermint breath mints filled the sterile air. The squeak of Italian leather shoes approached the side of my bed. Oliver, Mr. Ortiz, came the voice of the chief neurologist, a man deeply briefed on our sting operation. The paperwork is ready. As her medical proxy, you have the right to withdraw the ventilator and hydration. The brain swelling has not subsided. I am incredibly sorry, but Samantha is gone. Thank you, doctor, Oliver said. His voice was an Oscar-worthy performance of choked-back tears and heavy, burdened grief. It's what she would have wanted. She wouldn't want to live like this. Please, give me a few minutes to say goodbye. Take all the time you need, the doctor replied smoothly. The door clicked shut, leaving me completely alone with the man who had tried to murder me. For a long minute, there was absolute silence. I focused entirely on remaining motionless, suppressing the primal urge to shrink away from him. Then, I heard a sound that chilled me to the marrow, a low, soft chuckle. Well, Sam, Oliver whispered, his voice dropping the facade of grief entirely. It was replaced by a chilling, smug satisfaction. He leaned over the bed, his face inches from mine. I could feel his breath on my cheek. I have to admit, you had me worried for a second. Surviving that crash, that wasn't part of the plan. He reached out, his cool fingers lightly tracing the edge of my cast. I forced my muscles to remain completely slack. You were always so stubborn, he continued, his tone conversational, as if we were discussing the weather over morning coffee, always asking questions, always looking over my shoulder. You just couldn't leave well enough alone, could you? But in the end, it all worked out perfectly. Better than perfectly, really. He leaned closer, his lips brushing my ear. Vanessa was a problem, Sam. She got greedy. She thought we were going to sit on some beach in the Caymans together. Can you imagine? Sharing my hard-earned money with a junior associate? He laughed again, a dark, sinister sound. I put her in the ground, Sam, right under the foundation of the Whispering Pines project. By the time they ever pour the concrete, she'll be nothing but dust. And you? You're going to die a tragic hero in a terrible accident, and I'm going to walk away with $5 million. He stood up, adjusting his suit jacket. Goodbye, Samantha. Thanks for the payout. He reached out toward the life support console, his hand hovering over the master switch. Now, I opened my eyes. I turned my head slightly on the pillow, looking directly into his face. You're not getting a dime, Oliver, I said, my voice clear, steady, and loud in the quiet room. The blood drained from Oliver Ortiz's face so fast he looked like a corpse. His hand froze in midair. His eyes widened to the size of saucers, pupils dilating in pure, unadulterated terror. He stumbled backward, his knees hitting the visitor's chair, sending it crashing to the linoleum floor. Sam, he stammered, his jaw working uselessly. You're awake? I offered, sitting up slightly, ignoring the flare of pain in my ribs. Lucid? Aware that you're a pathetic, embezzling murderer who buried his mistress under a construction site? No, he whispered, shaking his head, panic finally shattering his arrogant composure. No, the doctor said. The monitors. Before he could bolt for the door, it burst open. Detective Reed stepped into the room, his badge held high, followed by two armed police officers. Oliver Ortiz, Reed barked, his voice echoing with absolute authority. You are under arrest for the murder of Vanessa Higgins, the attempted murder of Samantha Ortiz, and multiple counts of corporate fraud. Oliver backed himself into the corner of the room, his hands raised, looking wildly between me and the officers. This is a setup. She's crazy. I didn't say anything. We heard every word, Oliver, Reed said smoothly, tapping the discreet earpiece in his right ear. Crystal clear audio. The forensics team also dug up the Snoqualmie property yesterday. We found Vanessa. We found the flash drive in her boot. You're done. The fight completely left him. The charismatic, powerful senior partner crumbled into a pathetic, sobbing mess as the officers roughly pulled his hands behind his back, the sharp click of the handcuffs sealing his fate. As they marched him toward the door, he stopped and looked back at me one last time. There was no apology in his eyes, only a bitter, hateful defeat. Enjoy the rest of your life, Oliver, I told him coldly. I know I will. The road to recovery was not a cinematic montage of quick healing. It was brutal, agonizing work. It took 6 months of intensive physical therapy to learn how to walk without a cane. It took even longer to heal the psychological fractures, to silence the echoes of shattering glass and roaring flames that haunted my nightmares. But with every grueling step, I reclaimed a piece of myself. Oliver's trial was a media circus, but the outcome was never in doubt. Faced with the dashcam audio, the GPS data, the financial records, and his own recorded hospital room confession, his high-priced defense team quickly sought a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. He is currently serving 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole at the Washington State Penitentiary. I didn't keep the house. I sold it, along with everything that held a memory of him. With the help of Richard Conway, I successfully sued Oliver's firm for damages resulting from his unchecked embezzlement scheme, securing a settlement that ensured I would never have to worry about my financial future. I moved to a small coastal town in Oregon, where the air smells of salt and pine, and the sound of the ocean drowns out the ghosts of the past. I started over, not as the naive wife who trusted a monster, but as a woman forged in fire and absolute resilience. Betrayal leaves scars that never truly fade, but survival is the ultimate revenge. Thank you for listening to my story. If you found strength in this journey of deception, resilience, and ultimate justice, please like this video, share it with those who need to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible real-life stories. Drop a comment below. Have you ever trusted the wrong person? Stay strong, stay vigilant, and never let anyone silence your truth.